Welcome to the Rise and Rise of the Perimenopausal Princess with Jade Sterling. I'm your host, Jade Sterling, a perimenopausal woman who once found herself sitting in her car wondering what the purpose of life even was, at a time where it felt like that there was a mist over my body, mind, and spirit. The world was telling me that perimenopause had arrived and I was expected to surrender the next 10 years or so to survival, to ride the wave, to just get through it. But as a Generation X warrior, I knew there had to be another way. So I went searching for something to believe in, for something, anything to feel better. What I found was a compass, a map, and a process. Now I'm here to lead others out of the mist, out of the silence of the patriarchy, and into the highest level of personal power available to us. A portal into a version of yourself that you may not even know exists yet. With my experience as a women's health nurse, coach, and almost 5 decades of life as a human being, I'm honored to be your guide on this journey. Be prepared to feel inspired, empowered, reawakened as I guide you out of the mist and into the next most powerful chapter of your life. Join me as we explore the stories, secrets, and strategies to help you reclaim your power, purpose, and peace in perimenopause. And welcome back to the Rise and Rise of the Perimenopausal Princess with Jade Sterling. I am your host, Jade Sterling, and I'm here today to tell you the truth. I feel like it's time to fess up. It's been a journey for me over the last couple of months, really wanting to elevate myself as a perimenopausal woman, to step into my power physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, energetically. My first declaration at the beginning of this journey was to create $10,000 into my life in a month to support my family. It ended up being a 6-week journey where I was not working in any other aspect. I had no clients. I had no clue as to how I was going to bring in $10,000 into my life. But I felt like money was a good place to start, to step into the power of being perimenopausal in a patriarchal society, because that is something that is valued, that is something that is seen, that is something that is accepted as a status of power. And without having anything else going on in my life, I achieved that goal. I then went on to declare that I wanted to help 100 perimenopausal women feel better by Christmas. This is more like an energetic goal, to be able to step into power in that way. But over the course of this particular goal that I'm working towards, something's really been changing and shifting, and I have to fess up. When I spent almost a whole day the other day looking into what the definition of perimenopause actually was, and why is it that it's something that is now considered to be a medical term, medicalised, and yet it can go for up to 20 years of our lives as a woman. It can start with changes in our hormones from the ages of 35, that can go through up to the age of 55. But when you actually look at the physiology and anatomy of a woman throughout her whole lifespan, we are very changeable. And look at what happens in puberty. And yes, this is what's happening in perimenopause. So what bit of the change starts to actually happen when we're 35-ish? Because if we're changing from the ages of anywhere from now 9 years old to 16, 17, 18, this is the time of puberty. That's also about a 10-year block of time where we're going through puberty. So then does that mean from 16 through to 26, 36, we're stable? We're not, because we're having monthly cycles every single month. So that's 20 years where we have something that can get into a regular rhythm on a smaller micro level, monthly basis. So then in that time, I think that that's the time that we compare women to, anywhere between 16 and 36, because it's around that time that they say our hormones start to change. Our hormones are changing. It's ridiculous. It's around 36 our hormones start to change. But I know that there are lots of scientific research out there. And look, I'm a nurse, so I understand that the changes actually mean that that consistent rhythm on a micro level starts to change and hormone levels start to drop. And I've talked about it before, like our female reproductive hormones are like an orchestra that at the age of about, well, we're born with an orchestra pit, and that one by one, bit by bit, throughout our childhood, orchestra members start to come in and take their places. And then it's in puberty that the symphony begins and that orchestra members start to play and more people come in, and we end up, by the time, I suppose, we're like 16-ish, we have our full orchestra playing, and they play in a harmony kind of environment for up to about we're 36, right? So then from there, our orchestra members start to leave, but then they come and then they go, and then things start to change, and that consistently with our orchestra members, it changes. So this is the time where we start to talk about perimenopause. And by the time we're in menopause, the orchestra's left and we're left with the silence. But that silence is supposed to actually be empowering to help bring forth the embodied wisdom that we have learnt as women over time. We are then to use the information, the experiences, the knowledge, the wisdom that we have accumulated in our lifetime as women. And then we're to share that with the next generation, to be leaders, teachers, mentors for the next generation to come. But I'm actually finding we're stuck in this cycle of now perimenopause has become a thing and we're going to panic. Because if we pull the lens right back, the structure, the concert hall in which we live in, that we let our orchestra into, the concert hall is a building that is created in a patriarchal, capitalistic, materialistic society, with the risk of using those words that are cliche and buzzwords and might make some of you feel the ick and start to think, who is this person? I thought she was just a nurse who was going to help me with my hormones. No, I really do believe that we are told that our hormones don't have a place in the building that's in the city that is not being built by women, that has actually been built by men. And we are living in a man's world. And we get to a point where our orchestra members are coming and going, and there is a male conductor there somewhere, whether they're up the back in the boombox, whether they're down on the floor, wherever they are in your life. Because I grew up thinking that I was completely in control as a woman in my life, which I do still. This is what I teach, right? But I grew up with a single mom and sisters, and it wasn't a thing for me that a woman couldn't do what a man could do. And I never understood why people talked about the patriarchy or people talked about gender equality or the lack of, because I thought, but I have just as much rights. I don't understand. But the more that I'm coming into my perimenopausal power and pulling the lens way, way back, I realized that I felt comfortable being a woman in the construct of the patriarchal system that we live in. And now I'm realizing that it is a thing. And it's something that I was comfortable to be myself in. But now I realize that this is the problem. This is why perimenopause feels so powerless, because there is a man in our, there is a male narrative in our heads, in our concert halls, sitting up the back saying, you can't actually have orchestra members coming and going. You can't be hormonal. You can't be unstable. You need to continue to be productive. You need to continue to be consistent. You need to continue to be at an even keel, because that's how we function in a man's world. Even the jobs that most of us have set up to be, they're not made to manage hormonal fluctuations. We now have hormone control, which is good for women who are feeling like they're going to completely lose the plot, but we're losing the plot because we're in the man's story. And I could rant on And this is not a rant. This is just a little piece of truth that I want to place in to be a little bit thought-provoking, because now that I'm trying to help 100 perimenopausal women before Christmas, I'm realizing that the women who are coming forward for help, they want hormone replacement therapy, which is totally fine and totally valid. I've talked about it before. If your house is on fire, you need to put the flames out, and hormone replacement therapy can be a great fire extinguisher, but it is not the solution for us to carry on. We need to find the solution to be able to figure out then, when the crisis is over and we're left with ashes, what are we going to do with those ashes? And now that women are coming to me wanting exercise programs and ways to make more money so that they can build a business and feel like they're taking more control over their lives, that their nutrition is on track, that we're doing everything for our bodies. It's because we're trying to gain control at a time where we're told you can't lose control. You can't step out of the power that has been set around you to keep you contained and controlled. But of course it's going to be scary to step outside of that. But this is where we can still, we don't have to, I hate to use the analogy of Britney Spears shaving her head, because I once heard that she heard that analogy and was deeply offended by it. But Britney Spears had a very public mental, emotional, spiritual, nervous system breakdown. And during that time, she wanted to completely shed her identity, and she shaved her head. And that analogy comes back over time. Don't just go shave your head and completely strip yourself of your identity. But it actually worked for Britney. It may or may not work for you, but it's kind of also the burning the boats analogy. You know, the Japanese samurai who took his soldiers to war, and then he said, we have to win this war. And the way that he trained his soldiers to do that was that he burned the boats. So there was nowhere to go and they couldn't go home. They couldn't just retreat and get into the boats like they used to and go home. He said, you will either die or we will win this war. Now, wait, they won the war, but a lot of people did die. So do we have to shave our head? Do we have to burn the boats? What we need to do is pull our perspective back and have a look at the place that we're acting from. Britney shaved her head to shed herself of the caricature that had become the character of the part she was playing. And that was how she was able to step through it. The Japanese warriors were able to win the war by burning the boats. Sometimes we have to do that. But sometimes we just have to look at our culture and other things that are happening with that culture and just question. I've come to the decision that perimenopause is like Santa Claus. Santa Claus was a real guy. I really do believe that. St. Nicholas is something that I've looked back at. In Eastern Europe, there was a time where this guy, in the middle of winter, because their winters were so long and depressing, would make toys for kids and go and leave them at their houses to bring joy and bring light and bring hope into their lives. That idea migrated over to the Western world. I can find documented evidence about that occurring at the time where they were founding America. The Easter Bunny and St. Nicholas came from Europe over to the new settlers in the new land in America. And they brought the culture with them. And to cut a very long story short, over time, just as the Western world has done with most things, it has become commercialised. And it has become something now that instead of celebrating hope and joy, we actually roll in scarcity and lack. And we spend most of the festive season trying to make up for the things that we don't have. I think that, not to mention how it's kind of polluted the religious aspect of that, I feel like I could do a whole other video on culture. The fact that even in Australia, we celebrate the winter solstice, which is why they chose the birth of Christ at that time, because that is a life journey that then ends at the spring solstice, which is the rebirth of new life, which is the death and the rebirth of Christ. And in Australia, we live in the Southern Hemisphere, but our culture's completely adapted that. And that's absolutely fine if what we're actually celebrating is internal shifts and rebirths. But we're not. We're actually just supporting, again, a capitalistic, materialistic society that most of the time we don't even know why we're celebrating things that we do. Even in Australia, we have snow on our Christmas trees. Does no one question that, the fact that it's actually the middle of summer and we are living very extroverted lives at this particular time in life? I could go on, but perimenopause has become like Santa Claus. It's been taken, it's been studied a little bit and realized that, between this period of our lives, there is more change and other things are going on. So let's capitalize on that. Let's create that as a medical diagnosis. And that is the way that we're going to help women get through this time, by keeping them in the city of the patriarchy. It's the only way I can think to say it. I'm looking for new ways to say this because I found that some of these words are not landing with some of the women who are coming to me for help. And perhaps the women that I was talking to previously are no longer the women that I'm talking to. I'm actually looking for women now that are willing to question, that are not just wanting to fix themselves so that they can carry on in the construct that they're living in right now, but they're actually looking to feel all of their feelings and really look at what is it, what and how can we be women, but we're not in a woman's world. I'm not saying, though, that we have to admit defeat and raise the white flag and surrender. And I'm also not saying we have to shave our heads and burn the boats, but we definitely need to question and look at perimenopause just like Santa Claus. We go and we tell our children for the first 7 or so years of our lives that this man is real, that even though he comes into your house to give you things, then we tell them later on, by the way, it's just something that we've made up, so that it might be something that seems to be magical and something's happening in the background that can bring light and hope and excitement into your life. But then we tell you later on it's not true. I think this is also a huge cultural flaw. And I've had many conversations with people about this who think, oh my God, now I'm attacking Santa. But yes, it is something that I think, and I'm not ever going to tell anyone else's children that Santa is not real. My children know that Santa is not real, and they've never told anybody else that Santa is not real, because I've told them the story of St. Nicholas, that Santa was real. And that he used to be a person who would actually give and be generous and make things for other people. And that's how he would show up to share things at the time that other cultures celebrate the birth of Christ at the winter solstice. So that is actually what we do in our family. We use it as a time where we give. We're very generous. We make things, we create, and we give them away, and we share our spirit. So I tell the boys that people who are dressed up as Santa is actually, they're dressing up as that spirit of generosity, as giving, as creation, as introspection, as spirituality. And so they've never actually said to a child, you know that Santa's not real, even though they don't believe that Santa as a thing is a real person, because they don't have the concept of being deceived. They also don't have the concept that they need to pull the curtain back. They believe that Santa is a real spirit of giving and receiving and spirituality. So to be able to look at perimenopause like Santa Claus, it's a real thing. There's hormonal changes, there's things going on, but is it a construct that then we've taken, medicalised and minimised when it comes to women, their bodies and their voices? This is just something I really want you to think about for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, and maybe the rest of your perimenopausal journey. Because if someone is saying from about the age of 35 to 55 that you're going through a stage where you need to be contained and regulated, that's a big chunk of life for a woman to be told how to be a woman and how to show up and how to be. And I really feel that this is actually the portal for women to start to change the fabric of society, to actually step outside of their concert hall and start to speak to the city. My orchestra members are leaving, but do you know the city doesn't actually have to, the traffic doesn't have to all go this way. We can set up new roads, we can build new buildings, we can live in a world where we're not afraid to feel our feelings. We're actually not afraid to be in our bodies and use our bodies as the compass, to actually include intuition as part of our scientific method of moving forward in our lives and making decisions about our health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and that those elements are all considered to be equally important and of equal focus and an equal part of us moving forward in our evolution as human beings. But certainly women need to do a bit more of a deeper dive right now, pulling back the lens, because we're learning how to be a human being in a man's world. We're learning how to regulate in a man's world. And this is not serving women, which is why perimenopause goes for 20 years. And then we finally get to the end and we either wake up or we figured out how to just readjust our identity in the same city that lives outside our concert hall. So just have a little bit of a think about that. And this is all I'm thinking about all the time. And so where do I go to from now and here? I really feel like I've definitely physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically left my nursing career behind. It was a big week for me this week where I realized that that container, which I still wanted to show up and help women in this environment, in the medical field, which I still feel it's a part of our culture and so vitally important. But it's the piece that I think there are plenty of people out there doing it in the way that I think I could refer people if they needed that help and support and advice. But this is not how I want to show up anymore, because it does not support the expansion of women and women's health in this way. And so I'm really having to reflect, really having to start telling the truth. I really want to find a way to now start to explain and vocalize to women, how can we be perimenopausal and powerful in a patriarchal society? And how we can find different ways of asking that question so that we can reach people in a way that just gently draws the lens back to have a look at what's actually going on the inside for us, and then how we are showing up in the world that exists, the outside. So I'm going to have an exhale right now. I hope you can have an exhale with me. I hope that that's been a breath of fresh air so that you can open a window for wherever you are right now. Take a deep breath in and exhale any tension that you feel you might be holding in your body. I believe there is a different way as well as a different perspective. And I'm really on a mission now to light the torch in this dark place that I'm not really sure where I'm going with it, but it makes sense to me. Every video that I make, every piece of content that I put out there, and every woman that I am helping move towards just opening the perspective is one step forward to using perimenopause not as a medicalised way of dealing with our body, but as a portal to step into new dimensions of ourselves, but then help others around us, but also other generations to then go forth and do the same. I'm going to be looking more into matriarchal societies. I'm going to be looking more into what this might look like. I'm going to be looking more into the integration of where we are as a culture over here to where we could be going and the possibilities that are there. All I ever talk about is women and how they feel being less than over here, and how we can feel, first of all, in the middle, how we can actually feel peace and calm and hope, and then work towards, once we've got a platform of stability, we can then work towards building rockets on that platform to launch us into awesomeness. This is actually also going to come from a cultural perspective and narrative that we step away from the mainstream story that medicalizes our bodies and minimizes our voices. And we can step into a new truth where we use our body as the compass. We recognize that our voice alone can change a room, and we can expand ourselves in ways physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, energetically, that can benefit not just us, but ripples out into our families and our culture. So, if you are a woman who is at the moment feeling like she's bossed around by life, and you just need to remember that you have abundant energy, you can have access to lots of money, that you can have access to purpose and presence that feels powerful, come with me. We're going to keep doing this together. And that's a wrap on this episode of The Rise and Rise of the Perimenopausal Princess with Jade Sterling. I'm your host, Jade Sterling. If this episode landed, resonated, or even cracked something open inside you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a fellow midlife warrior. If you're ready to dive deeper and join me on this quest towards power, purpose, and peace in perimenopause, check out the show notes and get your free Positive Energy Circuit mini power session, your map out of the mist and into the next version of you. Until next time, I'm Jade Sterling, and this is The Rise and Rise of the Perimenopausal Princess with Jade Sterling.